This gentleman who I built an entire bald head prosthetic to impersonate during the Sexy Liberal virtual tours, which, by the way, I'm going to bring back by hook or by crook, along with more live shows, because once we're done with our Washington show, I think we go back to doing it our way and tour around some purple and some red states. Just saying. All right. Now, I do need some kidney emotes. That is true. And I want to, I'll bring it on once we, after Thanksgiving, because I think it's only fair. But I was gifted a wonderful ornament by a couple of people who came to a show the other day. It was very sweet. And I can't wait to show you guys, but I'll wait until after Thanksgiving. Although Summer and I did put up our tree, and so I will post a picture of that. We actually have 2 trees because we're crazy people. Yeah, so we'll get to that in a second. But this fella, who has a pinchy, annoying, Weasley little voice and a Weasley little face, is apparently, and I gotta say, I don't know, but Mark Levin, I'm getting sick and tired of these attacks. Okay? I don't think he's concerned about attacks from people like me for Trump's cabinet and the people he's picking, right? So I'm guessing he means from within, maybe? Attacks, you know, like right-wing attacks, like the people who are bitching around Fox, right? That's what I think. We'll see.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. Thank you for joining us. 2 great guests, Joe Concha, Tom Homan.
Joe Concha is going to be on there. Wow. How'd you get him? Oh, he works in the building. Forgot. Yeah.
But before we get to them, you know, I'm getting sick and tired already.
Oh, really? You look, I got to say, you look it.
The attacks on Donald Trump, like he's somehow anti-liberty, or he's somehow doing things that you're not supposed to do.
Well, why? Because he is. I mean, I got to say, talking about putting soldiers on the street to enforce his policies on the streets of America, that might be it's rubbing some of his constituents the wrong way, perhaps.
Whether it's appointments to his cabinet and so forth and so on. So
so forth and so on.
I want to nip this in the bud.
Finally, thank you. Nip this in the bud. Start bud nipping.
As you know, we try and do things a little differently here. We don't have a
we don't need facts or thoughts, or we don't work on it or do any any homework, or we just find a bud and nip it.
The line of 48 guests. We have 2 guests. We have long-form interviews. And for my opening statements, I always do my own research, my own thinking. And
right, as opposed because you can't afford a staff. Okay.
I want to give you a little bit of history.
Okay, here we go.
About presidential misconduct. Presidential misconduct. So we put things in some historical context, because a lot of the
right. So taking $17 million from the Chinese government, like, while you're president, is that going to be on the list? What do you think? Sharing national secrets with Sergei Lavrov in the Oval Office that lead to the deaths of at least 2 Israeli spies. Will that make the list?
People writing.
No, what are we going to go with? Blowjob? We're going to go with blowjob, aren't we? I mean, come on.
Speaking, don't have the foggiest idea what the hell they're talking about. Let's start with John Adams, our second president.
Yeah, let's go way back to John Adams. This guy got more ass than an outhouse hole. That was wrong. Sorry.
One of the great founders and framers. Mm-hmm.
And hairstylist. I mean, that's just amazing. That's he was a lot of people don't know this. His great grandson, Larry Fine. Just kidding.
Just a brilliant man, but
had cauliflower growing out of the side of his head, and it was always a problem.
Imperfect.
And because cauliflower, when not refrigerated, gets smelly.
In 1798, President Adams signed the Sedition Act, which criminalized criticism of President John Adams, but not Vice President Thomas Jefferson. It said in part, if any person shall unlawfully combine or conspire together with intent to oppose any measure or measures of the government of the United States, shall be punished by a fine not exceeding $5,000, which was a ton of money back then, and by imprisonment during a term not less than 6 months, nor exceeding 5 years.
Also, the entire country was like 20 years old at that point. Like there was, from the time of this act to the time of the start of the country was was less time than between now and the 90s. Just so you know.
If any person
imagine if the Revolutionary War had happened in the 90s. Okay.
Person shall write, print, utter, or publish, or procure, or knowingly and willingly assist or aid in writing, printing.
Oh, by the way, this shit came from the Federalist Society, where the Federalist Society, the Federalist Party, rather, where the Federalist Society gets their names, and they're the people who wrote Project 2025. So, fuck off, I guess.
Uttering or publishing any false, scandalous, and malicious.
Scandalous being the big hang-up, and that's what got it kicked out on constitutional grounds.
Writing or writings against the government of the United States with intent to defame the said government shall be punished by fine not exceeding $2,000.
Also, why are you yelling at this? This is largely found unconstitutional in like the early 1800s.
$1,000 and by imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. Well, that seems a little harsh. And you would have thought a founder and framer, second president of the United States, wouldn't back this. And again, notice he excluded Jefferson.
Oh, by the way, it was meant to be temporary. It was literally on a time limit. They were considered, hence the War of 1812. It was supposed to extend past that point. You could argue that it timed out just in time for the War of 1812 to happen because they were dealing with acts of sabotage from within caused by the British government and their allies and such. And so that was meant to push back against this in many ways, the same way that like Russia and China and Iran and North Korea are attacking us now. Okay. That we would put a temporary rule in place about disinformation or misinformation, at least from foreign sources, to protect ourselves from that kind of shit. Okay, there you go.
Jefferson, who he hated, was of the party opposite. Jefferson hated this, and later he and his party would win, and they would allow this law.
What was his party? Oh, the Democratic Republicans. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the Federalists were the people that were for it. The Democratic Republicans were against it.
As well as the Alien Act to lapse. So what happened? Middle Tennessee State University.
And wait, fuckwad. You can't just throw up lapse. Can I just be right again? Can I just dunk on being right again? You can only allow a law to lapse if it was written to be either reauthorized or sunset. They meant it to be a temporary fix, even as egregious as it was. It was a temporary fix against the outward attacks and the inward attacks by the British government, the monarchy, and their allies trying to undermine the newly formed United States. And it was 20 fucking years and change from when they had started the country, and that's when after the Revolutionary War, when England got back on its feet and was like, how do we cut this out from the bottom? And this is also, by the way, when they started siding with certain native tribes, and so Tecumseh sided with the Brits via Canada, and so he was siding with the Canadians, and everybody's like, Tecumseh was fighting for the Native Americans, and so that's why he sided with bullshit. He was fighting for his tribe to overrule all the other tribes in what would be like North Central America at that point, including part of Canada, as a deal with the monarchy. If they just went and fucking killed everybody. If they did that, if they went and killed all the westward pushing white people that had come from England and scared them and herded them back to England, then they would let them finish killing all the other tribes. Again, I know this makes people mad, but I do not make a distinction between people crossing an ocean or a lake to kill people who are different from them. It is the same moral act. and Tecumseh's people crossing Lake Superior and killing the tribes on the other side is no different than the fucking Brits showing up following the Puritans and killing people, you know, in what would become later Manhattan. You don't get points because your ship was smaller. It's weird. And again, this was all going on at the time. This was all fucking happening. Okay. This asshole.
University Free Speech Center. Scholars have traditionally cited 17 indictments and 10 convictions under this law, many upon charges so flimsy as to be comical. Targets at the act tended to be the editors.
By the way, also, this Middle Tennessee State University Free Speech Center, yeah, okay. Fucking right-wing think tank within the Middle Tennessee State University. Jesus Christ. Which they have to crank out shit like this, or because they're a state university, Tennessee will cut their fucking funding if they don't write, you know, jingoistic claptrap along these lines. So many flimsy as to be comical. Motherfucker, everything was comical back then. People were still writing on scrolls. The Constitution was 20 years old and it still smelled like hemp.
Of Democratic Republican newspapers who criticized the Federalist administration.
Oh, you're right. Middle Tennessee is spelled wrong. I didn't even bother to look. That's hilarious.
President John Adams. The most frequently cited prosecutions have involved Benjamin Franklin Bakke, who edited Philadelphia's Aurora newspaper, and John Daly Burke, and James Smith, New York's Timepiece newspaper, who were arrested under what Federalists alleged to have been federal.
The Federalists. Important note right there. Federalist, as in Federalist Society, as in the Federalist Papers, as in the shit that Republicans like Mark Levin are always citing. These were the guys that came up with this law, the Federalists, not, the Democratic Republicans. And if you think we live in a one-party fucking state, understand that the Democrats and the Republicans used to be the same fucking party. But they split specifically over the idea that some people believe we're a republic and other people believe we're a democracy. And the power of democracy is what keeps the republic alive. And other people are like, fucking listen to all these dumbasses who don't know how to read back then, especially, having to do what they ask us to do is going to undermine the country. That was what the fight was over.
Common law. Congressman Matthew Lyon, who owned a Vermont newspaper, and Thomas Adams and William Durrell, who respectively edited Boston's Independent Chronicle and New York's Mount Pleasant Register, were prosecuted under the Sedition Act. So were Benjamin Fairbanks and David Brown of Massachusetts.
Yeah, those assholes. Don't even get me started. David Brown of Massachusetts. It's Doc Brown, and he never even showed up to court because apparently he hooked a big silver device to the back of a steaming locomotive and was able to make 1.21 gigawatts out of I don't know how.
Reported the construction of a Liberty pole.
You don't say.
Luther Baldwin.
I think probably that was a different act entirely. I think you make a Liberty pole and you're just asking for trouble. I'm just saying. I think it violated the Comstock Act personally.
And Brown Clark of Newark, New Jersey were indicted for criticizing President Adams in a tavern.
Were they in a tavern, or was Adams in the tavern, or were they all in a tavern and they shit-talked him?
Other prosecutions included those of William Duane of Philadelphia, Anne Greenleaf of New York's Argus, Charles Holt of the New London Bee, and Anthony.
Also, why are you yelling this shit at me? We don't care.
Haswell from the Vermont Gazette, state legislator.
All right, this is not research you did. You just got shit off of Wikipedia and you're just reading it.
Jedediah Peck.
You found a link about the Sedition Act of 1798, and you're just reading one of the links.
Was indicted for circulating petitions.
If you do research, you can cite it without reading it.
Criticizing the sedition.
Sometimes you can show your work, but you don't always have to. you can quote it and talk about it and go, if you need to look this up, check it out at da-da-da-da, and then you can move on with it. But if you're just reading, because this is all new to you and you're not quite sure what the fuck you're talking about anyways, better to just put it up on the screen and not be on screen while you're reading it like you're fucking yelling your food order in a country where you don't speak the language.
As were Thomas Cooper, who edited the Northumberland Gazette, and James...
Northumberland, not North Cumberland. I just don't want someone doing time. I don't want them to dig up someone's bones and go, we totally put the wrong person in jail. We need to take this guy's bones and put him in jail.
T. Callender, who had published The Prospect before the U.S.
That's Marie Callender's great uncle, who The Prospect later became a cookbook on making pies.
What do you think about that?
I think you're an asshole. Nobody gives a fuck. What does this have to do with anything?
I don't believe Donald Trump's going to do any of that. Let's skip to the great Abraham.
Okay, so what he's worried about is that Trump keeps referencing the Alien and Sedition Act, and what he's saying is that nobody's going to be put in jail for sedition. This is not a wrong think bill, and it's been found it's sunsetted, and therefore it's been found unconstitutional. And so Adams at that time, and by the way, if there was a civil war going on right now, who thinks Donald Trump would allow people to speak fucking freely, to shit talk government people in Washington, D.C., to walk around, protesters, walk in front of the White House going, the South will rise again, or carry a fucking Confederate flag if we'd have broke out into a civil war? Who thinks that right now? It's fucking ridiculous. Of course he wouldn't. Well, I mean, they'd be hiding him in the bunker like they did last time, but still.
Lincoln, often considered by me too, if not our greatest, our second greatest president.
Yeah, after Trump. He literally means after Trump. Which again is based on fucking nothing. Dude couldn't even pass an infrastructure bill.
In 1861, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus from Washington, D.C.
Which is, by the way, that was the name for his mustache. Just saying.
to Philadelphia. Why? Because
we were in a civil war.
The army was not set around Washington, D.C. There were rebels who were threatening Washington, D.C. Congress was out of session, and the president said, well, I got to do something about this, so I'll send the army that I have to start to arrest these people and throw them in prison. But wait a minute, you actually have to charge them with something. He said, well, I'm not. I'm going to suspend habeas corpus from Washington, D.C. to New York. He then expanded it beyond that. In 1862...
Yeah, because they were rounding up spies, motherfucker. The country was split in two. So this basically, I think what Mark Levin is hearing from Republicans right now and why he's talking about this shit. And by the way, I didn't realize that Lincoln had ever seen the electric light bulb, much less put his finger in a socket. But apparently I was wrong. But the reason why he's bringing this shit up is because Republicans are freaking out in the Rand Paul world, in that realm of libertarian Republicans. They're panicking about the fact that even on the simplest level, RFK Jr., how is RFK Jr. going to do the things he's going to say he's going to do? There's only two ways: new regulations and enforcement, or paying people to do it. Literally, giving them subsidies. Stop putting this ingredient in in the food, and we'll pay you for the spoilage that happens because of it.
Expanded it to cover the...
Otherwise the cost gets passed on to the customer. Inflation. That's how it happens.
Entire nation. And he did so in defiance of a federal appellate court that ruled that he couldn't. And the judge that ruled, ironically enough, was Taney, the one who ruled in Dred Scott that helped cause the Civil War in the first place.
Gee, is it ironic, or is it exactly that this guy was working for the other side?
Only Congress under our Constitution has the power to suspend habeas corpus. Thousands of people were sent to prison under the authority of the military at the direction of Lincoln. Thousands, including 1/3 of the Maryland State Assembly and political opponents. In fact, he had a member of Congress who was sort of a peacenik. He had him deported to the South, just so you know.
A peacenik. Mm-hmm. Or he wanted to make a deal with the South to keep slavery. You know, like these people who just want peace between Russia and Ukraine, and it always involves Ukraine giving up territory.
300 newspapers were closed or suspended temporarily.
Yeah, kind of an important detail. Just saying. What a fucking tit.
Either at Lincoln's direction or in the actions of his subordinates, like the Secretary of War, but also including Union generals. Some of the newspapers were in the North and criticized Lincoln's handling of the war or urged him to sue for peace.
Right, because they were siding with the South. It was a divided country. They were undermining the war effort, and he was trying to keep the whole country together, and the South had their own constitution. They were ready to separate. They just wanted to take a bunch of people with them.
Wow. I don't think Donald Trump would do anything like that.
Fuck you. If there was a war broke out in the country, he'd do way worse. Jesus Christ, he'd turn the soldiers loose on the streets to put down any... He'd have, like, hit squads rolling around going, hey, while this killing's going on, just knock off some of those fucking black bloc Antifa fucking people. We know their addresses. Go over to the FBI and at gunpoint have them give you their home addresses. You kidding me? He's not going to do some of this shit because we don't have a war going on, you weirdo.
To you, let's take World War I. Let's jump ahead. The country was deeply divided. But Woodrow Wilson was itching to get into that war, and we did. So what did he do? One of the worst presidents in American history, another Democrat. In 1917 and 1918, respectively, Woodrow Wilson signed the Espionage and Sedition Acts. That's the Espionage Act they've been trying to use against Donald Trump, by the way.
You mean the one he wants to bring back?
Which would come to be known as the most egregious assaults on free speech in our history. Again,
asshole. We literally had subversives all over the fucking country at that point. We didn't even have the means to keep track of them. Motherfucker, we didn't even have a fingerprint system at that point.
Thousands were arrested and prosecuted, mostly political opponents, mostly people just exercising their speech.
Yeah, just mostly. What about the other ones? You want to bring up a single one? Mark, bring up a single case. Most of them, like so-and-so and so-and-so, and this person who's so-and-so and so-and-so, and this person who later had their charges reversed and was allowed to be buried in Arlington because they were miserable. Like, bullshit.
And some were sentenced to many years in prison. Some were sentenced to up to 20 years in prison.
Wow. You don't say. Like who? You're not going to bring them up, are you? Because if we looked them up after you brought up their names, we're going to recognize that they were actually fucking German spies and planning that subterfuge. They were intentionally trying to keep us out of the war on behalf of the Germans, right?
In June 1918, near the end of World War I, the Socialist Party of America's presidential candidate, Eugene Debs, delivered a fairly carefully worded speech because he was aware of this Espionage Act and so forth. But it was a scathing anti-war speech in Canton, Ohio. So what happened? He was arrested. He's running for president. He's a socialist. He's criticizing Wilson. He's arrested.
Yeah. Trump would never arrest someone who's a socialist for criticizing him if he could get away with it. Asshole, you think he should have been in jail just for being a socialist.
He's charged with 10 counts of sedition. He was eventually found guilty of incitement and obstruction. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, where he ran for president and received about 1 million votes. His sentence was commuted in 1921 by the new Republican president, Warren Harding. Wilson also instituted the most extensive censorship regime.
Also, for the record, the Democrats back then are the Republicans of today. You have to understand that during the Civil Rights era, when the Civil Rights Act was being fought out, and those issues came to bear, the Dixiecrats, the Southern Democrats, became Republicans. And the voting bloc that the Democrats had a hold on for a long time shifted Republican because those people abandoned the Democratic Party because of their support for the rights of women and African Americans. The voters that supported Wilson would later be the kind of people who would support Reagan or Nixon or indeed Donald Trump. Different fucking people. They switched streams.
Team of any president, monitoring newspapers, planting pro-government stories, threatening critics, and so forth and so on. That Espionage Act, as I
Which again sounds exactly like Trump's dream date.
said, lives to this day. Who else? I'm just picking and choosing. There's many others. Franklin Roosevelt. Oh, the great Franklin Roosevelt? Oh, you don't understand. No, Franklin Roosevelt, among the worst. FDR, as David Burnham pointed out in his book, A Law Unto Itself, in which I wrote about it on Freedom of the Press.
Power, politics, and the IRS. Right, creating the Internal Revenue Service. What a bastard.
FDR, confidential government documents prove that Roosevelt and the officials around him did not hesitate to mobilize the IRS. And I'm quoting, in efforts to destroy the careers of individuals they decided were enemies.
What was the standard by which they decided those people were, quote, enemies? Was it just kind of they didn't like their face? Or was it the fact that they were working for a foreign government?
FDR ordered the Treasury Department and the IRS to destroy former Republican Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon.
And at this point, you know, he was 22 years old. He had a long, vibrant life ahead of him, and they snatched it from him. This is him right after he graduated from university.
They developed phony criminal tax charges, even though they knew he was innocent. Morgenthau, his Treasury Secretary, said to Roosevelt, he's an innocent man. Roosevelt said, I don't care. And they sought to put him in prison. And Mellon was harassed for a decade. He was harassed for years. And he wasn't the only one. FDR ordered the IRS.
So he didn't go to jail? So he wasn't found guilty? They talked shit about him in the Oval Office and then it didn't go anywhere? Great story, dude.
To go after newspaper publishers like William Randolph Hearst and Frank Gannett, who began...
Why would that be? Was it just because they owned a newspaper, or was it because they bought newspapers after they were already in charge of other big industries and they were seeking to control, and which, I mean, ultimately led to the fairness doctrine coming out, because they had basically control over the minds of Americans because they controlled both sides of the political argument between the two of them and could basically just be, you know, pro-oligarchy in every story that they told.
To oppose his New Deal. And he especially
right, which saved the lives of millions of Americans.
Targeted Moses Annenberg and tried to put his paper in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Inquirer, out of business. So he went after newspapers that disagreed with his policies. He went after newspapers that were owned by Republicans.
Who, by the way, would later be seen as Democrats and vice versa.
But he also went after political opponents. He unleashed the IRS against Louisiana Governor, former Senator Huey Long. Who
was a sweetheart. Why would you go after a guy like Huey? I mean, come on, Huey Long was. There was nothing wrong with that guy. I mean, if you like the KKK, I guess.
Considered a serious potential primary opponent. They were going to actually put him in prison, but he was assassinated before they could. And Roosevelt targeted many, many political opponents, citizens, businesses, and so forth.
Totally.
Through this IRS.
Hold on. You go long. Hold on. There we go. Hit down here, you crazy thing. Okay. My Lord. No. Go away. Stop it. I'm trying to... Hold on. Control minus. There we go. Go away. Huey Pierce Long Jr., a.k.a. Kingfish, was the 40th governor of Louisiana from 28 to 32. Think back to, if you would, 1928 to 1932. Governor of Louisiana. Now, on the spectrum of racial equality, Where would you find a guy who would be governor of Louisiana from 1928 to 1932? Where would that person be on the spectrum? Okay. Let's see. Long was born in poverty. Here you go. 20 tallest. They're elected to U.S. Senate in 1930. Didn't assume his seat until 32. He established himself as an isolationist, arguing against Standard Oil and Wall Street orchestrated American foreign policy. It sounds like now. Hold on. This basically you could argue that Huey Long is like Donald Trump is like the second coming of Huey Long. He was viewed as a fascist demagogue. He argued that, big whatever runs everything and, little you can't do anything. Right. Okay. Taft praised him as the most brilliant lawyer who ever practiced law. I mean, he sounds like Matt Gaetz, essentially. He appealed to sharp economic and class divisions in Louisiana to win the 28 gubernatorial election. Once in office, he expanded social programs, organized massive public works projects such as a modern highway system and the tallest Capitol building in the nation, which, by the way, they had. And he proposed a cotton holiday. Through political maneuvering, Long became the political boss of Louisiana. He was impeached in 29 for abuse of power, but the proceedings collapsed in the state Senate. Boy, it sounds familiar, doesn't it? By the way, this was federal money that built all that other shit. That he was the public works projects and the expanded social programs. That was under Roosevelt. Like that, where the fuck, it's all New Deal shit. He's one of these assholes who showed up and like cut ribbons at stuff he was against, essentially. And let's see, to stimulate the economy, he advocated massive federal spending with a wealth tax and wealth redistribution. These proposals, and again, this is the flip shot. Remember, he was Republican, which later would become what was seen as Democrats. And the thing, he was like, for all this shit, sounds like a Democrat, right? Until, wait, black people too? Eek. All right. And then, let's see, education, marriage, and then there is the Huey Long, and then his gubernatorial campaign. And here's Long developed novel campaign techniques, including the use of sound trucks and radio commercials. His stance on race was unorthodox. According to T. Harry Williams, Long was the first Southern mass leader to leave aside race baiting and appeals to the Southern tradition, the Southern past, and address himself to the social and economic problems of the president. He basically ignored them because he didn't think they were part of the conversation. The campaign sometimes descended into brutality when the 60-year-old incumbent governor called Long a liar during a chance encounter in the lobby of the Roosevelt Hotel. Long punched him in the face. In the Democratic primary election, Long polled 126,842 votes, a plurality of 43.9. His margin was the largest in state's history, and no opponent chose to face him in a runoff. After earning the Democratic nomination and easily defeated the Republican nominee in the general election, 96.1% of the vote. Totally above board. Long was the youngest person ever elected as governor of Louisiana. After some 15,000 Louisianans traveled to Baton Rouge for Long's inauguration, set up tents, free drinks, jazz bands, evoking Andrew Jackson's 1829 inaugural festivities. Victory was seen as a public thing, blah, blah, blah. First year, he does all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And he was impeached in 29, and he went in front of the Senate and senator-elect, and then he became a senator, and then Roosevelt and the New Deal, and he hated him, and the Chaco War, blah, 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 and the whole share your wealth thing, which was the most democratic thing about him. And then he was going to run for office, and then tensions in Louisiana, and he was assassinated. There you go. Long traveled to the state capitol to pass a bill that would gerrymander the district of an opponent, Judge Benjamin Pavey, who had held his position for 28 years. At 9:20 p.m., just after the passage of the bill, effectively removing Pavey, the judge's son-in-law, Carl Weiss, approached Long and, according to generally accepted version of events, fired a single shot with a handgun 4 feet away, striking Long in the torso. Long's bodyguards, nicknamed the Cossacks, or Skull Crushers, then fired at Weiss with their pistols, killing him. An autopsy found Weiss had been shot at least 60 times. Long ran down a flight of stairs and across the Capitol grounds, hailing a car to take him to Our Lady of the Lake Hospital. He was rushed to the operating room where surgery closed perforations on his intestines, but failed to stop internal bleeding. He died at 4:10 a.m., 31 hours after being shot. His last words were, "I wonder what will happen to my poor university boys," or "God, don't let me die. I have so much to do." Depends on who was there. It's just like the New Testament. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, or my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Two different accounts by two different gospels, but that's journalism for you. There you go. And yeah, there we go. There you go. So yeah,
Rest through the Internal Revenue Service. But there's more.
There's more. And by the way, why is this supposed to make me feel better about Donald Trump being given like new immunity by the fucking Supreme Court for any official duties?
And by the way, Donald Trump has never done that either.
Yeah, because he didn't think he could. What the fuck are you talking about?
Never would.
No.
John Kennedy's IRS provided him with tax information about individuals, companies, and groups that he was interested in. He wanted to know about Getty, so they got his tax returns. Other people that opposed him or just out of interest, certain people in Hollywood.
That was the fucking Cold War. They were in the middle of the Red Scare. They wanted to know how much of the money was above board.
It initiated an audit program, the IRS, under Kennedy, aimed at conservative groups. They called it the Ideological Organizations Audit Program.
Also, why aimed at conservative groups? Oh, because they were the biggest ones in the take, because the Russians spotted that they would be an easy play if you played to their, weird kind of federalist ideas.
So he went after conservative opponents and conservative groups through the tax investigation and audit process. He used the FBI to track virtually every move of, you may have heard of this gentleman, Martin Luther King Jr. They tapped into his phones and they bugged it.
Also, the idea that Kennedy was behind this and not Hoover, who was insisting on it, is kind of bullshit. They might have reported up that they were keeping track of, as part of a group of people that they were just, checking on. But good Lord.
His house. The FBI actually went into King's house and placed bugs.
Right. J. Edgar Hoover, scumbag, hero of yours.
And they monitored him. And it even got worse under LBJ. And by the way, I'm doing this quickly. I mean, Kennedy's got a lot worse than this. But Johnson even stepped it up. He used the FBI.
Oh, so you're just skipping Nixon entirely. You're just gonna walk right by Watergate, an actual break-in coordinated by the president.
The IRS and the CIA. Used the FBI and CIA to spy on Barry Goldwater's presidential campaign. There was widespread wiretapping of the campaign headquarters. In fact, they uncovered that one of Barry Goldwater's staffers was gay, which Goldwater knew. And they were threatening to use that. And Goldwater wondered, how the hell did they know that? But he called a senior person in the Johnson campaign and said, do not destroy this man's life. Do not destroy this man's life. But they threatened to do it. Ultimately, they didn't.
Great. Cool story, bro.
Johnson was so paranoid about the Kennedys that he had the FBI send a team of men to the 1964 Democratic Convention in Atlantic City. He was wary of Robert Kennedy. And then Attorney General Robert Kennedy was unaware of it, so he directly had the FBI monitor, send men to his own convention, his own nominating convention. They tapped Martin Luther King's hotel room. They bugged it.
Again, what the fuck is this guy on about? This isn't because we're attacking Trump. This is because of Republicans freaking out. This seems to be a thing where he's trying to defend Trump's asshole cabinet picks as being fascist or dictatorial, or this idea that Trump's going to use U.S. troops to carry out his deportation thing. And Levin seems to be just ate up with like pre-defending Trump by cherry picking shit throughout history. Good Lord.
The rooms of other civil rights leaders attending the convention too. And that information went to Johnson. He wanted to know all about it. In fact, in 1968, after Hubert Humphrey received the nomination for president, LBJ had the FBI tap his phones because Johnson wanted to know if Humphrey was loyal to him, including regarding the Vietnam War. He also had critics of the Vietnam War surveilled using the FBI, the IRS, the CIA, and other federal agencies. Did you know any of this?
Yes. Who gives a shit? How is this supposed to make me feel better about the fact that Trump is putting completely idiotic people in charge of programs they can't even fathom, that they don't have the intellectual capacity to understand, much less run.
Probably not. Now you do. What about Barack Obama? Oh, not Barack. The Hill newspaper, I write about this in Unfreedom of the Press.
Yeah, you and he both wrote about it, yeah.
2016, New York Times reporter James Risen, who was subpoenaed twice in the 2010 indictment of Jeffrey Sterling under the Espionage Act of 1917. He refused to reveal his sources, but Eric Holder and Barack Obama were going to force him. They were going to try. Risen was subjected to a 7-year nightmare of subpoenas, responses, appeals, one rejected by the Supreme Court, threats.
Oh, so Obama was right about the charges enough where his appeal was rejected by the Supreme Court, and it was a conservative Supreme Court even then.
Of imprisonment by the Obama-Holder regime until it was decided he would not be forced to testify at all. Even CNN's Jake Tapper at the time, he said the Obama administration has used the Espionage Act as the Biden administration used it against Donald Trump. The Espionage Act to go after whistleblowers who leaked to journalists more than all previous administrations combined 7 times, said Tapper.
Yeah, but because hacking is new. And the difference between you finding, as a whistleblower, you finding something out that you see with your own eyes, and you take that information and you go and give it to a reporter because you've run it up the chain and they're not listening to you, or you fear that this crime will go unpunished. The difference is that because of WikiLeaks and how it was being run, and DC Leaks and Julian Assange, and then of course Snowden, there were people who were calling people and going that they knew were sympathetic because they saw what they posted on social media and said, "We know you're in this position. We'll show you how to get this information out of the servers." It isn't that they spontaneously saw this and were offended by it or thought it was wrong. We want this information. Go get it and bring it to us. And in a lot of cases, even largely the Snowden stuff, it wasn't even stuff that was criminal. It was just stuff that looked spooky by U.S. standards to the average person, enough to undermine the validity of what the U.S. government was doing. But like the PRISM program, the biggest thing that Snowden uncovers is literally something that one corporation can buy that information from Google, but the government can't buy it can't have their own system to get it, and by which they paid for it largely from Google and these other sites because it's spying or some shit. Like you know, the terms of service are one thing, and the terms of service says we can sell it to anybody except the government, which is, I don't know why that makes any fucking sense at all. If it's for sale, it's for sale.
Nobody went after the press like Obama and Holder in my
bullshit. And also, by the way, that's because they went after very specific points dealing with espionage, and the reason that Trump didn't go after them is because a lot of it's just complaints.
Modern times. Nobody.
Oh God, just lazy. All right, I'm literally bored with his fucking blather.